panel is not my doing entirely. This is, in fact, not much at all. This is an event that is brought to you, co-sponsored by the Office for Equality and Opportunity and Age International, and of course the CSW Alliance. And so I'm going to hand over briefly to Lynn, who will give us a few words on their role.
So just on behalf of the UK CSW Alliance, welcome. This is about, I think it must be the 7th or 8th of our joint event between UK civil society and UK government. And as such, we think it's an example of best practice because we haven't seen any other member states organising an event with its civil society jointly. So we're very grateful to our government for being that example of best practice to have this joint event with us, which is in its complete year. So thank you very much to all of you for coming, and thank you very much for Gillian and OEA for the work that you've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right, now on to the main event. We're splitting this into 2 sections, and I'm going to be posing 2 questions to each of the panel members in each of those sections. First of all, we're going to look at factors influencing experiences of violence against women and girls across the life course, and also looking at data on how we measure that those experiences. The second segment will be looking at barriers to seeking help and support, as well as looking at lived experiences. So we will be asking targeted questions of the panel, to the panel in each of those segments, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and comment at the end of each section. So please, those teams whilst we're going through. So who are these amazing panel members? Well, first of all, we have one in order on my sheet, so forgive me if I'm not great on autocue. First of all, next to me, we have Dr. Mariam Bibi from Pakistan, and she is the founder of Quendocorp, and she is no less a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. So, start on for the big. And then we have Claudia Mahler, who is from Austria, and she is a UN independent expert on the human rights of older persons. Then, moving on, we have Dr. Natalie Turney, who is a lecturer, UK-based, lecturer in law at the University of Reading and co-chair, newly announced, of the UK CSW Alliance. And then we have Alison Marshall, who is CEO of Age International, who is an international woman based in many countries, who will be providing closing remarks. And then right at the end, we have Rebecca Zirk, who is from representing Wales, and she is Director of Research and Innovation and co-lead of the Jewish Choice Project in Wales, which addresses domestic abuse of older people in Wales. So I'm sure they're a very fascinating set of views and experiences that we'll be able to benefit from. So on to the questions. So this first section we're talking about the experience of org and how we capture those. So we'll talk about the factors influencing the experience of org across the life course first of all. So I'm looking to the panel to tell us a little more about what different forms of violence, abuse and neglect are experienced by younger women, women in midlife and older women. Which norms and attitudes and practices influence women's experience of violence across their life course? And what are the structural issues that influence women's experience of violence across their life course, and why are some of those issues being unaddressed, ignored, or just accepted? Can I turn to you first?
Okay, thank you. So I think one of the global challenges that we have is when we think about violence across the life course, we're not typically including older women's lived experiences. So they've been marginalised.
Sorry, can you speak into put the microphone closer? Thank you.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was just saying that I think one of the global challenges that we have is that older people, older women are not included in the discourses around violence against women, and their experience are very much marginalised. Yeah, we know from our research in Wales, in the Irish Trust Project, but also other global research, that women are likely to experience the same forms of abuse, regardless of their age. Yes, that abuse may shift and change in nature. It may intensify even in later life through bereavement, retirement, and all of these other factors that may influence the way in which that abuse is experienced. But we should still recognise that older women who are subjected to these forms of abuse and not really considered.
Thank you. So I will just address I'll follow on from the point that Rebecca's just made about structural issues in regard to data collection. Because this is a massive issue, actually one that Alison raised last night in the context of older women when we received a briefing with the OEO. The need for disaggregated data is urgent and it's alarming. So the UK Civil Society Women's Alliance coordinated a working group on the agreed conclusions. And within that, one of the amendments that we proposed was in regard to disaggregated data. The zero draft provision did mention the need for disaggregated data, but our proposal was to mention explicitly some of the characteristics that needed to be featured. And so if I just, in case you haven't seen the agreed conclusions yet, I'll refer you to paragraph UU. It now says, invest in national statistical systems and systematic justice sector data collection and gender analysis, ensuring that data are disaggregated by income, sex, age, marital status, migration status, disability, geographical location, educational level, as well as by other characteristics relevant in national context for comprehensive metrics. And I'm really pleased that this has been retained. I will highlight that our original proposal also contained the characteristics of race and ethnicity, and those have been removed, which is itself alarming. But drawing on the issue of age, because this event is about the life course, it's so important that when this is taken forward, all states look at this as a commitment to disaggregated data. And when it comes to age, pay real attention to that, because the issue with data collection within this age category is that so often group really vast age ranges together, and it can give a false sense of reality within that data. It can be skewed. So particularly in the case of older women. As the geographical location, of course, this is a UK-sponsored event. The disaggregated data is also vital across all 4 nations. So there needs to be some cohesion and joined up thinking within that. But it's really important that we look at each location within the United Kingdom so that the data can be meaningfully used to implement policies. And I think it gives the UK an opportunity to take a world-leading approach, which will impact so much and so many. One thing I'll just close by mentioning in respect to data is that we can't fail to mention the experiences of women and girls living under occupation. This was again something raised yesterday, women who live under occupation or in conflict zones. They're all affected and often targeted by violence against women and girls, and their inclusion in the agreed conclusions and actually in conversations throughout CSW 70 has been lacking. So this is really important that we don't forget to mention them, that we don't forget to give them that visibility in the data, in policies, because they are perpetually re-victimised by broken and silent systems and data collection systems. Thank you.
Maybe I just start where you stopped in regard of armed conflicts and violence in internal displaced camps. We very often see, and I speak from the lens of older women, we very often see that older women are not included at all. But if we go back to the lived realities of older women and see what's really happening during armed conflicts, no woman is spared. So even if they are not part of the data, because very often also the humanitarian sector as well as the combatants don't take care of older people at all and not older women, they face every violence you can think of. There is sexual violence against older women, nobody cares about. And I had a couple of really shocking conversations with administrators and with people from governments when I asked about data on older women about sexual violence. And they asked me, why would I need this? Why would somebody touch an older woman? So you see, we are far away from lived realities and data collection and seeing that this is needs to be part of policies. And we also see that they are not willing to acknowledge what's really happening in reality. The other aspect I also want to say is that a lot of older women are so fully ashamed of what's happening to them, they will not speak up. So even though we know that everything is happening to younger women, middle stage, and older women, we will not find a lot of evidence because it's so shameful for them. I also would like to share one example I came across during one of my country missions, because that's the beauty of the mandate, that you have the chance to travel and really talk to older women in different settings, that they told me, you should speak with the older women over there because she's facing violence on a daily basis from her family members, with whom she's living, because she doesn't have an income on herself. And I asked, if you all know, why don't you do anything about it? And they said, because she's not saying it loud. She's so ashamed that even the whole community knows it, nothing is done. And she's staying in this family setting with the shape or changed power relations, and nobody really takes care of her. And I think this is not only one example, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of examples out there. So we also need to shift the conversation that this is not a shameful thing to speak up and claim that you're a victim of violence. And the other aspect is I also wanted to share with you, because access to justice is one of the big focus areas in CSW today. Older women very often don't go to court because they also know that nobody believes them. They are not seen as liable victims in the end, telling a story. Very often people think they're just telling a kind of story which is not true. And I think this also needs to be changed, that we ensure that this is a safe venue for them to have access to justice, and that we believe them and we support them. And the last thing I would also, I'll stop here. I know there is a second round, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Already you introduced, my name is Mariam Bibi and I come from northwest part of Pakistan. And I represent here Bangalore and the F5 Foundation of Aging and Inclusive Development. I think already what I wanted to say already has been that because we share older women issue, I share a level of similarity, amazingly similarity what you have just said. Violence against women across the board is very common for everyone, women everywhere. But older women are facing it more severely because of the factors already we have discussed, but also because of other factors like poverty, factors like in Pakistan, kind of share that Pakistan is faced with all kind of disasters, man-made disasters, floods, earthquakes, and military, and so massive displacement and migration taking place, and in those you have briefly mentioned, but women suffer very badly. Basically, there is this cultural breakdown, the cultural values that because culturally elderly would be very much respected and maybe 20, 30 years back, but that very urbanization and cultural breakdown in the cultural value has badly impacted on older women. So the violence, the kind of violence, you name it, every kind of violence, older women are facing financial, social exclusion, neglect. And on top of that, a situation is exacerbated because there is literate older women are by and large not educated, and so they don't have access to services, and they don't have information. So I think this isolation, I have so many examples that during disaster, when because our area is mountainous area, so suddenly there were announcements in the mass that people, the community should leave immediately home, and then so families were kind of rushing, and then there were gunfire and so on. Elderly woman, she lost her senses. She started screaming and wildly running out of her family, and so then she was with very great difficulty she was got hold of, and then all tied in ropes and then brought down to camps, and then later on they approached us, and then we had to admit her in a hospital, which even the hospital did not have space, which was already full. The hospital was already full. So, this kind of problems are really, this is just one example. There are so many examples, uh, even in the central area, because of the economic pressure, and then also not only economic pressure, but social changes in the social values and lack of educational and health facilities. The older women are considered irrelevant. And the serious problem is that it is deeply institutionalized, acceptance. Even older women do not, they also accept that they are no more relevant, that they are no more good. And so that is a serious issue. It is accepting them and then engaging them with the meaningful discussion needs a lot of effort. First of all, in our culture, there is segregation, and reaching out by NGOs like ours. So you have to have a lot of work done with elders, with men, with religious leaders when you get the permission, and then enter their family. Older women are not in the forefront. They are because they are ashamed. Family is ashamed to bring them and to be part of the discussion. So we have to ask how many, where are they? Then she's sick and she's sleeping, but then one has to go there. And so the point is that I'm just reinforcing what already have been said, and then it needs already, as you said, data is very important. It needs exclusive attention, not only by the family, but by the government, by the political will has to be there. And I think reaching older women and emphasizing and working on their abilities, because older women have a lot of abilities also, but these are all lost in the process because of the factors like climate change. So we have, like in our area, many examples that older women would take cattle for grazing, and then they were saying that around 10 years back it was not that difficult, but now we don't find any greenery around, and so we have to go far away. We have to go far away, and then we have to not only cattle, for the cattle, but also for water, but also for wood. So that has also very badly impacted environment.
Thank you. A lot of really fascinating and helpful information already. I am going to open up the floor to questions, both online and in person. So if you're online, if you could raise your electronic hands if you have a question, and raise your physical hands or any appendage in this room. But I'm going to take shared privilege first. As I very much heard, first of all, the challenges of finding out who has been affected by violence, and particularly Claudia, I think it shook all of us that response that you heard is why would would an older woman be attacked, and that level of ignorance is quite shaking. But please could you share with us how do we, these are really challenging environments. I mean, some particularly, like Miriam was talking about, floods, rural communities, the logistics of getting in and collecting that data, but also the shame that we've all been talking about. How do we collect data that is robust enough for us to make policy and to make changes without re-victimizing the people who've already gone through a horrifically traumatic process? Who wants to go first?
So, your question is
How do we get the good data?
okay, I think the main issue is reaching. The main issue is that older women become one of the important, category of people. So normally when people go to a village for village selection for any program, for education, you name it, any program, then community is considered only men. So one has to make effort that community is not only men, community also consists of women. And then now, more important is that community also include older women. So when you include older women, then they get emphasis and their issues are also, then their issue also start coming to the forefront. And so one problem is that there is disconnect. So there are national policies, there are the provincial policies, there are regional policies, there are the district level. There are so many layers, and so it has to come through all from top to bottom to that importance is given. So I think there are ways, we call it rural appraisal. So that rural appraisal is such an effective way of engaging older women, everyone in fact, because then you come down to their level, you sit on the floor. I'm talking about rural Pakistan setup, and then you use very such tools which are not sophisticated. For example, chapati, you know chapati. Chapati is, so you draw chapati on ground and say, okay, this is chapati, what portion of older women exists in your village? So then they break and say, okay, this is the proportion. And then you say, how far is the water? And then you have a map and this, oh, that far. So there are ways how to get engaged, and it's very reliable data and it's like verifiable data. But efforts have to be made, and the lacking is in the effort. Lacking is giving them priority. Effort is making them important as an important segment of the and then most important is allocating budget, and then training. Training and understanding what older women go through. That lack of understanding is also there.
Be that.
Maybe I just add one thought from a structural basis from the UN perspective. So what we very often see is that there are no real action plans in the UN agencies which tackle older women. So That's why there is no data from those parts. Or we also see that there are age limits. For example, we all know about reproductive rights. Why would we not need any data after 48? So you see, the structural issues themselves hinder us to get the good data. So I would say we also need to start on a structural basis. Then we go down to the local basis, or regional, national, whatever. But this is exactly how we also need to deal with it. Ensure that we have laws, ensure that we really have policies and national plans and regional plans, which include all the women in all the aspects of violence, and also make sure that there is a focal point, which is easy to go there and bring your stories there, and where you also find some solutions. Because on a regular basis, you don't know where to go. If you go to a police station, they don't know what to deal with you, how to deal with you, and how to support you in your endeavor to get justice. So let me say this, we also need to think it through from a structural basis, starting at UN, going to the regional level, see what is there on the national level, and ensure that the implementation is taken seriously.
I think, like from structural perspective, family is the most strong structure and the basic structure. And violence is massively at family level. So unless we reach to the family level and inform the family and the community, and at structural level, if it is not informed by the grassroots level families, I think that is what, I think that most of the policies are made at national level, which are not very much informed by the what happens at the community level. So I agree, but then very important that we make more effort not to have just at national level sitting in air conditioned halls and then coming up with solution. That does not work. That doesn't work. It has to be community level, and that is difficult and takes a longer time and more effort, and that these efforts have to be made. Thank you.
Just very briefly to add to that, I think the question you were drawing on the hard to reach areas in particular, and this is where I think it's recognising that the stories go unheard when we don't amplify them and realistically place value on them. And so we really need better recognition of citizen data in some of those places. It means reaching out to support organisations that work in those areas, and asking them what data they have. Working with faith groups, I recognise that with some faiths that stigma still arises, and that can create a barrier to kind of reporting instances of violence. But that's not the case across the board, and so it shouldn't be taken as a sweeping statement. And I think that it's recognising that no data leads us to nowhere. So we need something. It may not always give the fullest picture, but if we can take pockets of communities and understand them better, it will give us a better understanding and a way to move forward.
Thank you. And I just want to add to what everybody else has said here, and that data is not just a methodological issue. It is the issue, it's structural, it drives our practice, it drives our policies, it drives who we pay attention to and where we spend our money. And if older people are not included in those conversations, they're never going to be a priority. Mm. And I think from what Natalie and the other panelists were saying there is about us thinking more creatively in how we are capturing that data on older, how we're facilitating environments in which those voices can then be heard, and then reflected in what we do.
Thank you very much. And yeah, really fascinating, starting with the experiences in Pakistan and ending with Wales. excuse me, but still that kind of, that need for structure and relating structure at every level to relate to the community and the people that you talk to. So really fascinating. Right, I'm going to attempt to do roving mic here. Please put your hands up online if you'd like to join in. I will press doing Hannah, so you go from over.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting talk. My name is Helen Zoe from Martins. So I've had many different careers. I first started off being a sexual abuse counsellor, and I worked with over 500 different cases, and they covered from every single age group. What was really interesting, I mean, research within sexual violence is very much a third of all cases are from immediate family. Then the next third is from very close relationships within family, and then the final third is actually strangers. So it's very important. I completely agree. Community is vital. That's also a very dangerous area for a lot of people. A lot of people that I spoke to, because I spoke to again every age group, you've got issues with ritual abuse, which is in major communities, and it's really hard to access it. Normally, if you have facilities that are available, they will be closed down because it's part of the smaller communities that are there that have the influence that close it down. You've got so many different layers here that are really, really important to factor. Some of the older women that I spoke to were really sweet. All they wanted to do was, at one point in their life, just tell someone it happened to them. And they didn't really want to do anything else. And I think there's a layers in this where a lot of older women are, everyone's grown up in different generations, different norms. And I think the older generation this is a very general statement, so I know it's completely true, but they have a stoicism that allows them to just like, oh, it is what it is, and I'll ignore it. And that doesn't help the data. It doesn't help us understand the reality of the situation. And I think it will obviously be a lot worse than what it is. Sorry, there's so many things. But there is one thing that I do want to ask. Towards the end, when I was working there, I ended up working with Operation Nutri and had some Jimmy Savile case, which was interesting as well. And towards the end, we were working with people in prisons. And a lot of people, both men and women, a lot of the key factors of why their life decided to go down that route was because of sexual violence and things that they couldn't control. And that was the only way for them to control something in their life. And they've gone down this route. How let's say with the justice system, or let's say with many different layers here, with sexual violence, how do we tackle this? Because this is impacting every single person in every part of life. How do you address it?
Thank you. That was really insightful to get some of your experiences on the front line there. I think one of the things to tackle is that sometimes we can hold ageist assumptions about what older people's needs and wants are in terms of access to justice, or access and help and support. And what we've seen come through very clearly in our research engagement directly with older victim survivors is that there has been this historical legacy of absence of legal protections, absence of rights in the sexual violence context, when we're thinking about marital rape and black violence in the 1990s, where that was, well, husbands were granted immunity within those contexts. And so I think it's important that we consider those social, historical, and contextual issues that are influencing women's health seeking, but also recognising that they may not necessarily be aware of their rights and entitlements now, because a lot of our public discourse, the way in which we raise awareness is not targeted at older people specifically. So they're not necessarily going to be aware of those. And so when we are having conversations, those disclosures are being made, it's important that we're also raising awareness of those rights and entitlements and really exploring with them is something that they want to pursue with whilst recognising that there may be those individual level barriers like the services, like the shame and embarrassment, which is very real. But also they don't act as a barrier to us when we're offering that help and support to that person when we're exploring those options.
I just wanted to, a point I made earlier about re-victimisation. I was speaking in the context of data collection, but I think one thing we also need to consider is re-victimisation within the justice system itself. So speaking from a UK perspective, one of our panellists in our UK CSWA event yesterday, Jocelyn, she mentioned male prisoner early release schemes and bail. And it's really critical that we thoroughly review their use, because between these mechanisms, offenders that are serving sentences already imposed for or facing trial for violent and sexual offences are released. And that means that women and girls, survivor victims, are at immense risk of harm. And that's without any consultation, really, with those victim survivors. The news comes, and that's incredibly re-traumatizing. And that will itself have a consequential impact on reporting and so on, because it's about perpetuating the distrust of law and the justice system. So it's really important that the mechanisms that we already have in place are thoroughly reviewed.
No problem. I was just thinking, all what you're saying is quite true for the Western part of the world, and also for very, good justice systems. But there are many countries still where you don't find any justice if you're hitting a woman or if you have sexual violence against a woman, what she's suffering. There is no therapy available. There is no justice system really available. So I think we also need to keep this in mind. We sometimes really have to develop the systems to support the victims as well. Thank you.
I think in our country, we don't have formal justice system courts, at very level, especially in our part, Northwest. There's a Jirga system. A Jirga consists of men, and sexual violence must not be reported. It is life and death situation. The women who face violence get killed because she brings honor issue to the family. So, but as I said, it is doable, and trust is very important. So I think agencies working, like NGOs working with community at the very level. So first, working a lot on with men, getting their confidence. But so generally saying that, are there any issues with this release? Are any problem women are facing? Then generally not naming it. Then they say, yes, such and such was killed because of that. It is a process. So when agree in our context, then you have separately have women group. Women are then very, free about discussing the environment with you, and they are chatting and they are sharing. And then, so not naming the woman, but then bring that to the Jirga. First time we had some experiences of bringing such issue to the men Jirga, and they were saying, I think they were so much enthusiastic to help out, because first time they got the confidence that they can be. Even men did not have the confidence to discuss it. We have to break. We have to create an environment. We have to create a conducive environment where people feel free to discuss things. That environment is not there. So you provide that environment to men, and then you provide that environment separate, because we have segregated, society. So then you work with women, and you are not specifying on sexual violence. You see, what are the problem? Water is a problem, health is a problem, and then you kind of help them. What else, Then they come up with that problem. And so then we share that on charts with men. And so they become very enthusiastic and the religious, imam is part of that. Oh, this is against Islam. He becomes very emotional. This is against Islam. And then, well, first the issue, you break that kind of tension and you are able to discuss things, then solution is also good. Because then there are ways how to protect the woman who has faced violence, because the same men that start offering you, that you will do it. Oh, she can come to our home, still her problem is solved. But I think, as I said, it is a giving importance, reaching out to the needs, spending time, making effort. And then there are local government, then at local government there are systems, but if community themselves take them, not a third party, external, then the trust is built. So we have addressed one or two such cases. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to you next, and Ruth, you asked a question there to Jocelyn, and we may have to, I wanted to go on to the next session, but we may be able to squeeze you in if you're quick.
Thank you. My name is Eddie Mugawishima. I'm the president of an organization called Silaiza, advocating for the rights of other people. The country I come from encourages much young people. And what I wanted to say about data or violence against other people or women in general, women in my country, they think that they depend on their family members, including partners, children, and others. And then most of the violences are perpetrated by family members. And they think that if they reveal that, they be like punished or they won't receive anything, there's no protection. That is one thing. And sometimes they think that it is their fault. If they have violence from their children, they think it's because they didn't provide an adequate education. That is another issue. And another thing that I can say is about data. As I said, our role is to advocate for the rights of other people, but we cannot get any data because everything is up to 49. And where even they mention something the same and above, from 50, imagine 50 and above. That is another issue. So what I propose or I suggest, one is that we need to have this data, but not just go slightly, and we need deep researches. Because if we don't have that deep researches, we won't get adequate data. Another thing is capacity building. They need to know their rights to participation and to share activity and to advocate for themselves. Another thing that I can say that there is a problem of the legal and the policy framework at the national level and even at the level. There is nothing that I can say. This no binding instrument. So this is what I wanted to share, and I hope that finally, as we are getting to discuss this, maybe the session will be found. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really helpful.
Thank you. Very clearly from Softness International. I just wanted to pick up on the stage business again. I think we pose a real structural issue with the data that is embedded in everything. And I think if you look at, yes, we've got an issue about collecting the data, but we've also got an issue about what data we collect and also what ages we collect them at. So we're talking about older women. Well, what is an older woman now?
An older woman, my mum was working, was she retired at 60, and then you probably only lived, a handful of years or whatever. Now you're retiring much later. You're in a different world, aren't you? So when you have those bands of, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80 as your collection point, then the 60-year-old and the 80-year-old are completely different people. And they're financially different, they're different from a health point of view, and so lump everybody. And now that I'm in that, and I'm thinking, I'm getting lumped with people that don't actually really represent me. I think that's really critical. And all those bands are embedded in all our digital systems, in all our legal systems, right way throughout, aren't they?
Thanks, right, yeah. Nobody wants to be passed on. I'm just going to take one more question from Jocelyn, but I'm going to also, I've noticed the 4 of you, and I will take questions from you in the next section because I'm keen to hear from our panelists again. Very.
Thanks. Jocelyn Scott, barrister and human rights lawyer, Bar of England and Wales from Australia, and the National Council of Women of Great Britain. And my question is about money. So it will principally be really to Natalie because of her expertise in corporate law and her knowledge of tort and equitable remedies such as coercion and coercion and you'll know what I'm meaning, Natalie, and also contract law and harsh and unconscionable contracts. But I want to say first, everybody in this room knows that older women can be subjected to violence. And I'll give you an example where I work with a prosecutor. The woman was 82 and the man who was charged with rape was 42 and her grandson. The second point I want to make before my question, really quickly I will be, Julian, is you've all just raised a fantastic argument against collapsing UN Women together with the population UNDPP, because the age of the population is really about giving birth, about women's reproductive capacity. Therefore, it's going to be concentrating on a particular age group, and older women will be ignored. So it's a fantastic argument. Now, quickly to my question, which is about sexually transmitted debt. And sexually transmitted debt is a term that was invented by Jenny Lawton and Emma Swart, who were two, Emma's a barrister and Jenny's a solicitor from Australia. I'll give you an example. My client was a woman who was a widow and she owned fully her own home, and her son wanted to go into the trucking business. Trucks cost as much as a home does. They are an enormous cost, the trucks that run all across the country or the continent. And he persuaded her, not by a fist to the nose, not by grabbing her wrist, not by physical violence, to mortgage her home against his loan. And I was representing her because the mortgage was being called in, and the son was absolutely unconcerned about the fact that that was all his mother owned. And if she lost the house, then she would be homeless. And he did not care. And this can happen between husbands and wives. The wife is signed up by the bank or the finance provider to be the guarantor to the husband's loan. And the irony here, I promise you, ending on this point, the irony there is that banks and finance providers are reluctant to give loans to women independently, but they will sign the women up to support their husband's debts or their son's debts because they know that most women will pay it off, whether it's £1 a week, £10 a week, £20 a week. Women will pay off. So, Natalie, what do we do about sexually transmitted debt? Because this is about a civil remedy rather than looking at the criminal aspect, which of course is there too. Thank you, and thank you, Gillian, for letting me finish.
I actually think that that moves on to our next section. So rather than picking up a Q&A, I'm really looking for us to go to all of the panel on this. Is obviously a very qualified person to be on the panel. Yeah, I think that links into what are the barriers to help, to seeking help and support. And also, if you could share some lived experiences that you've come across and how they have been used. We talked about how data is critical to informing policy, but how does lived experience help to inform policy and practice? If I hand to you first, Natalie, as you've already been name checked, then others can then go on.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll start by addressing the question. I think one of the first things we need to do is recognise this idea of sexually transmitted death. Can I just have a show of hands, those of you in the room who have heard the phrase sexually transmitted death before? So very few. And we need to start with a recognition that this is a real issue. This is, here we're dealing with an issue where women don't necessarily know what it is they're signing up to. Or it may be signed on their behalf, which is a critical problem. And this is a familial and cultural form of duress, right? That women are placed in these situations where they are forced into these agreements and therefore forced with the obligations that fall thereafter. But it must be seen as an unlawful duress, right? So we really need to draw some more recognition. There needs to be campaigns in order to lobby banks and so on against these practices. But this is why it's also really critical that we have women at decision-making level, because we need women to be informing policy change on this, that these can be easily recognised and dealt with so that women aren't faced with these perpetual debt obligations. There's a couple of other things I would just like to mention in answer to your question, and I'm sure others will touch on the idea of the sexually transmitted death too. So I'd like to give them the opportunity to. It's really critical in terms of this idea of barriers to support, beyond this idea of economic support, that we have well-funded and fit-for-purpose justice systems. And that's critical to equal and equitable access to justice for women and girls. We need, for example, timely hearing of cases. When they are reported, they need to be dealt with timely, so that we are encouraging and promoting that if you report, it will be dealt with, and it will be dealt with effectively. Those of you who've heard me speaking in some other meetings this week have heard me mention the proposals in the UK to significantly restrict jury trials. And one of the reasons mentioned for this is that it will allow for more timely justice. But the reality is that justice won't be delivered at all to many women and girls, because if we restrict jury trials to only serious cases, who decides what offences that form violence against women and girls, this umbrella term, are serious enough to fall within jury trials? We need to remember that we as women, and I'm talking from the UK perspective here, jury trials started back in the 1100s, but we only got the right to sit on a jury in the early 1900s. Okay, so our right to be heard by our peers, fellow women, is so critical, and it's really important that that's fed into the policy making on this too. And I'll just finish with this note before I move on to my next speaker, about proactive law reform, particularly on online harms. It's been mentioned a few times this week, and I'm glad that we discussed offline violence against women and girls in such depth, because that is a pertinent issue, and I don't want that to get left behind when we talk about online harms. But online harms are a real problem. There are persistent gaps in legal frameworks between offline and online violence against women and girls. And in the UK, we have the Online Safety Act. It's a brilliant first step, but we've already seen that technology is advancing so much, it's outpacing the law, right? So, and we saw this with the nudification tools launched with Grok in January earlier this year. So we need to take a revolutionary approach to that law reform, and some of that can start with corporate offences, criminal law, and we can deal with it in civil law too. For example, we have a failure to prevent model in the UK, where in England and Wales, where we have failure to prevent bribery, failure to prevent fraud. We should have failure to prevent online harms, failure to prevent X, Y, Z. We can expand this model, and that will allow redress for victims too if we ensure that a statutory duty of care is embedded into that legislation. So it's time that we start thinking preventatively and proactively.
Rebecca.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a bit about the barriers that older women face, and particularly from a Welsh perspective, because that's where I've got data is where I speak directly to older women. We know that barriers faced by older women are not just individual. Yes, they are powerful. We hear a lot of them say around shame, embarrassment, around self-blame, and for the perpetrator, particularly in an adult family context. But it's also those organisational and structural. And when I talk to older women, that is what comes through the very strongest. We know that domestic homicide rates are rising the fastest in the age groups over the age of 70, and that older victim survivors aged 60 and above represents 28% of domestic homicides in England and Wales, so nearly a third of cases. And yet, when we look at our service provision, our specialist domestic abuse services and those high-risk responses, older people are only representing 4% of those community services. So there's a real failure there, a systematic failure on an organisational level in terms of our recognition of older people as victims of abuse, but also the risk that is posed to them. So in Wales, we've seen that there's, and across England, that there's been a lot of efforts towards training and skilling the workforce to be able to recognise older victim survivors. But the problem is that services are not sufficiently funded. They're not well resourced. There's no dedicated ring-fence funding for older victim survivor services. And so when we are responding to older victim survivors, and there is that complexity of age, we're looking at victims who may be living also with dementia or have significant care and support needs. They may have a lifetime of trauma that they're dealing with and complex PTSD. That response requires intensive long-term support, and yet our services are not resourced or equipped to respond to that. So we need to be thinking about how we're commissioning services, which then goes back to our points right at the beginning around data, and it's not having that data, but also older people are not coming into mainstream services. So that's an additional challenge that we have there in terms of looking at potential avenues to access information and support.
When we talk about structural issues, I think, that's why I did 2 reports on the subject. One on violence against older people and one on women's issue, because I really saw that the intersecting factors are very often not taken into consideration. What does it mean for an older woman who's dependent on family system, for example, on the power relations to come up and report that there's violence, or that the example you brought, that her son is taking advantage of her situation. As I said before, there's a lot of shame into these kind of structures, and that's also why they don't want to come forward. But we also have to keep in mind that the power relations very often shift in older age, and so a lot of older women really feel that they are left alone and left behind and don't have anybody to support them, because the only relation they still have is the family. And if they report that there is a kind of violence in the family system, they might totally be alone at the end. And, what do you do then? So I think this is also something we really have to keep in mind. Do we really have an alternative setting? Do we really have shelters or safe places? And I think this is something which I find is not very often tackled in this regard. So where can an older woman go to? If you also question shelters which are for violence against women or domestic violence, and I sometimes ask, do you also have specific programs for older women, especially those who might need care or support? There's nothing. There's really almost nothing. So we really leave them behind, also in our structures. And when we're also talking about financial abuse, which is another aspect where you mentioned this quite well, we have all these camps and everything. And I think digitalization and not having access to banks anymore, and you have to talk to a chatbot, do I believe what this robot is telling me or not? So I think there's also a kind of not trusting our digital modern world anymore. So we also need to have some kind of safeguards from banks, as you already said, to ensure that this is taken as a serious thing. And I still also want to go back to what I also learned in a couple of Southern countries, that women, especially older women, still don't have any inherited rights. So what does this mean for them, They did all their life unpaid care work for the family system, and then they can't inherit because the son is taken over immediately. So you have been part of the family structure, which might be sometimes wonderful and lovely, but not also being not the best solution for everybody. So what I also saw sometimes when I try to also see if there are alternatives, I very often get also the answer, yes, but we take care of all our elders in our family system, not taking into consideration that also the family systems are changing because of organization, migration. So who's left behind again? Check who is living in the rural areas nowadays. It's mainly older people, it's mainly older women who are left behind without any protection. And therefore, I still hope that we manage through also the UN work on a convention rights for the people to once again raise awareness that this is an issue which is not addressed. So get policies, laws, and the implementation, which you already pointed out, is so needed. Thank you so much.
I think that older woman issue is contextual, very contextual. Every context is different, right? And so I have experience in our own context. And as I said, the informal decision making structure, and women are already out from decision making structure. And one benefit that older women have, that they can, that older women can communicate with men, that they can very strongly raise their voices, provided a bit of support. Their agency is supported. Their agency is supported, and there is huge potential. For example, when there are conflict, and when I go to Nigeria, I sit there because of my age, and we listen, and then they also listen, and then they agree, although they have ego issues, and men have many ego issues. But they do listen, and then it has the impact also. Because argument they are very, because religion is also used as a very strong argument against women, and interestingly, religion also can be used very much strongly in favor of women. But who should do it? Older women can do a lot. I think they have experiences, and then we have borrowed Pakistan has recently, not recently, I think around 10 years ago, borrowed local government system from UK. And so there are village council, and in village council, there are memberships for farmers, for poor women, for laborers, for minority. And then so efforts should be made that there should be representation of older women also. Because that is it, this forward decision making forum, and it has budget allocation also. And it comes to election. So, so to me, every problem has solution, provided we think from solution perspective. And then every issue has solution, and but I think solution, as you said, structure, so influencing the decision maker, not in a way that this will threaten and then you kind of again put them down. It's taking people along I find that is a better strategy rather than attacking and making them on spot that you are bad. So I think my strategy has been, I want to learn from you. What does our religion say about education? I want to learn, and they feel very good. Men feel very good. Oh, we know much more. Helps them. I think you have to strategize how to package your message. So a lot can be done from that
Positive conversations.
Yeah.
May I add one point, because we were talking about money before. And I would also love to see how much money goes into development cooperation in regard of older women and violence. So maybe this is also something we need to check on our national budget, how much we use for these kind of issues. So thank you.
Very quickly, sorry, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to speak to the second part, but I just want to return to Justin's question very quickly, because I mentioned that I think it's really important that we all recognise this idea of sexually transmitted death and economic abuse. And so with that call to recognition, you might want to think about how you can inform those campaigns and lobbying and so on. I speak from a common law perspective because in the UK we have a common law legal system, but it will be similar in many jurisdictions. It was a point actually that you made, Claudia, about calling on banks. In the UK we have safe spaces, which includes some banks where people can go in and they can declare when they're at risk. But in terms of what the banks will do, if it's about this kind of issue, sexually transmitted death, the problem is that, of course, it's an economic burden on the bank, right? So I've called for great representation of women in policy, but I think it's important for us to bear in mind, Jocelyn touched on the idea of equitable remedies. The idea of an equitable remedy is that this remedy should come in where there's unfairness. And I think we can all agree that this is an unfairness. It may also be that in contract law, where a woman has been misled into signing a contract or mistaken as to its nature, her obligations, and so on, that contract itself could be voided. So there are legal mechanisms that already exist. It's the knowledge of how they can be applied and the knowledge of this problem in the first place, right? Because those of us in the room, some of us are hearing about sexually transmitted death for the first time. So I think that this is something that's really important. I'd be very happy to discuss after the event if anyone wants to talk about it further.
I just wanted to add that in our context there is a lot of migration, urbanization taking place, and at structural level there is no proactive planning how to retain rural people in the rural area with all basic facilities. That is lacking, very much lacking. And so shanty towns, the people living in cardboard and cities. So I think it is related to everything. It is related to everything. For example, in our context, the security, the fear. So the whole society is driven by fear. Like what's happening now? They are involved in Afghanistan, what's happening? And that is also to fear. There are so many factors. And who suffers the most? Women suffer the most. Again, we have to think holistically, and then whoever have wherever one is based. Like here we are in UK Mission and the Commonwealth, so I think the message very strong. We should go for peace also. So in our context, we are really suffering from war and conflict and things.
Thank you very much. Right, I have 4 left over questions. I'm now sorting out online. Don't worry, I've seen Anne's virtual hand. I'm going to go to the back because I'm conscious that I've not been on my track.
Thank you so much. My name is Manzani Mamutange from South Africa and Lesotho, and I think there are very critical points that we missed. First of all, we have the United Nations offices in different countries, especially in the Southern Africa, which are so high and mighty and unreachable. So the very people that we're trying to assist in terms of the challenges that we're discussing in this room today cannot reach or access these offices, and that's where the problem starts. Because it's, let alone the security, which is important, but the systems that go to the grassroots to assist the very elderly, the children that are abused, are not available for them to access. Secondly, there is traditions and cultures where people do not understand that they are actually subjecting themselves to abuse. You have women that think, offering my children, offering myself to someone in society who is economically better than I am, in order for me to survive, to eat every day is okay. They don't understand that they're participating in human trafficking or they're actually opening themselves up for violence. So how do we then create awareness and also open up platforms where they are able to voice this out? And we have neglected community leaders or community safe spaces like our elderly who are actually safe spaces for such data to be collected, because if you don't have someone you trust to tell and say, this is the issue that I have, this is the problem that I have, then how are you going to get that data? Because the UN office, like I said, in every region is high and mighty and inaccessible. So those are the challenges that actually disturb anyone like myself who would say, I'm a representative of the United Nations, whatever organization, but now how are we reachable? How do we reach our grannies, our mummies in the communities who actually, the kids, the other grannies, the other elderly in the communities can actually voice out challenges to? So we need to go back to the grassroots and actually solve the problem of systems and accessing information. Thank you.
I'm going to collect all of the questions that we've already raised hands for and then put them to the panel, and then we'll see how much costs. So that was a very powerful question on how do we bridge that divide between multinational organisations and real life people on the ground. So the panel would have a think about who would most like to answer that.
Hi, my name is Wendy Marshall. I'm Director of Gender Justice at the African Alliance. Similar question in terms of people of faith are often in the local community in hard to reach places. For example, I was in the DRC a few years ago and listened to older women, survivors of sexual abuse and rape. I'll stay in the details, but it was horrific. And the key thing there is it's the older women that got raped because they couldn't run away fast enough when the rebels came into the village. And it was Anglican churches and Anglican Peace Centre that were picking up pieces for survivors of sexual violence. But often they're doing it with no funding, in the middle of nowhere, with no access to justice systems and no support from funders because they are seen as too small, but actually they're doing vital work. So I guess the question is, and also to the government, is we've got all of these initiatives, the PSCI initiative, the conflict related sexual violence, we've got the Women, Peace and Security agenda, but I don't see those rural, often women having their voices heard on these peace panels and negotiating peace, or getting the support that they need to recover from the trauma of those rapes. So a difficult question is, what solutions would you suggest, and particularly to the governments, is how are you including particularly people of faith who are in these regions doing the frontline work?
Thank you very much. Just one more question in the room, and then I'll pass over to Anne.
Thank you. Sharon from Commonwealth Elementary Association. I guess the question is, and also a bit of a statement, I think also the not really hearing much about multi-agency working. There's onus on, for example, a lot of grassroots organisations. They're already overstretched, as mentioned before. They're already at capacity. And kind of this ends up adding on to their existing kind of overworked burden. But we haven't really also heard from the fact that there are other multi-agencies, for example, healthcare providers that do kind of, or private healthcare. How much can we kind of band that data? Because the data is there, it's just in silos, and there's a lack of collaboration, which then means that people are retelling their stories, re-traumatizing themselves, having to repeat the same thing over and over again with little impact or kind of justice at the end of it. How much can we improve that multi-agency working? And I think that's what I've seen also is not only that taking place in the UK, but in other settings where there are fantastic organisations that have the data, but don't necessarily have access to the ministry, for example, to share that data. Or so there's no kind of collaboration in many spaces. How much can we better kind of improve that? Because essentially what we do end up seeing is that the burden then falls back onto smaller organisations who then get really tired and, you know, and yeah, how do we resolve that?
So it's almost like these three questions were planned. All very much looking at it. We've got the macro levels, we've got the micro level, and we've got real life human beings. How do we pull that together? How do we get the money, the efforts, the direction all together in that? Anne, would you like to attempt to provide a question from you?
Oh, thank you very much for bringing me in. Yes, I wanted to reinforce the point that Natalie made, which was an excellent one, about the need for safety by design in technology, because we're effectively... Can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am. You break up slightly.
And they're effectively being experimented on by global scale technologies just being released onto the market, and see what happens. And it's very helpful, in particular for young women and girls, with men and boys copying misogynistic and violent behaviour that they see online, and should be seen as a health and safety issue. And we should be talking to our health ministries and to our consumer ministers about this to get both the redress and the attention to the scaled up harm that's being done at a generational level. And an appeal really that this does need to be done internationally. We are making progress in the UK. I mean, obviously, as a women's organisation, National Council of Women, we'd like to see more. But there is some best practice that can be copied in the Online Safety Act, and it can be extended, which would be really helpful. With the big tech companies being so powerful, we need to work on this together.
Thank you very much, Anne. Right, we have now overrun, but I will give the panel a very brief moment to respond to those. How do we join everything up before I hand over to Alison, who will wrap up the session? Rebecca.
Okay, so much to unpack there. I think that the very basic response is that we need to invest money. We need to invest money to be able to carry out that research that speaks directly to those communities, those hard to reach communities, to gather those voices and perspectives. And from a multi-agency perspective, I think, yes, services do hold vital data, but we don't have a national consistent framework for collecting that data. And that goes back to the point that was made earlier around of what point do we class in older age people, is it 60 plus? And then just we don't do the same with younger age groups. We wouldn't compare response rules experience for 50-year-olds, yet we do with a lot of people. So it's about that ageism within the ways in which we're collecting data and kind of picking that and realising that when we continue to capture this data. But I'm sorry, that doesn't really fully answer the question, but I'm conscious that I need to pass the mic on.
Okay, very briefly to touch on a few of the questions. So the first question was about the hard to reach areas and the women and girls who can't necessarily access the offices. The need to kind of break down traditions and culture, and I really wanted to talk to that point. This was something that we discussed in a panel yesterday on legal literacy, so I'll try to catch you afterwards to give you the details of the recording. It's really important that we do build that awareness, and that comes with a legal literacy, so knowing rights, but it actually has to start with education on sex and gender biases and so on. Before you know your rights, you need to understand these biases and cultural discriminations that take place. But I want to touch on your point, which was that many organisations are totally overstretched. So investment is key, but again, we know that that's not necessarily always going to happen. I will just end with this point. When it comes to corporations, businesses, we need to put more responsibility on them. We have seen a rise in recent years of this concept of corporate social responsibility, or ESG, environment, social and governance, and many corporations have made commitments to that end. And actually, I think we can tap into that and say maybe the investment doesn't always come from government, though it should come from government too, but it can come from corporations too. And that would also hit the agendas and commitments that they've already made.
Thank you. Just once again, thinking through where are older people and older women, especially missing in the UN system as well. So I'm the United Nations independent expert for the enjoyment of all human rights for older persons, and I'm the only entity, more or less, for many years who focus on the human rights of older people worldwide. You can imagine that's not good enough. So we tried also to see that we get more specialists or focal points into other UN agencies, which is, I think, also something which is needed for the ground. If you have a special person, he or she might also find ways to reach out. And then you can also collect the different aspects and bring them back. So from my perspective, a specific focal point or agency is also needed to deal with older people issues, especially older women issues, because otherwise we still stay in the silos. And everybody's working on their own things and nothing is coming together. So we know this for sure. And the budget has an implication and is really something everybody is needed, but also the coordination and the willingness to cooperate is really a high value, especially in huge agencies where we very often see the cooperation is not the first thing they really want to do. Because we're also talking about, budgets in the end. If you cooperate too much, it might also have an implication on your budget that you're not needed anymore. So I think this is also one aspect we have to keep in mind. In regard of how do we reach those people, with the small entities and the small NGOs, for example, in different parts, I still think if it is part of the agenda and you know that you have something you can report to and you listen to, then you can bring, and then you're willing to bring your information to a bigger agency maybe. I think it's like we said, if you trust them, you might be happy to also have exchanges and share the information. But if you don't trust them in a way and you just feel, okay, I'm doing the groundwork and nobody cares and they don't support me and they don't value me, why would I report and take the next step? So I think it is really also a kind of cooperation and trust. And I really want to highlight that if a country really has a focal point which deals with older people's issues, especially with older women's issue, also in regard to digitalization, then we might also have a chance that businesses get interested. And we already have business and human rights. But as you said, CSR is a big issue already, but older people are almost never there, and they are almost never there when it comes to development of new technologies. So I think there's a lot to do. Unfortunately, we don't have the best solution right here, but the cooperation is already something we can enforce much more. And this would be the next step for my end. Thank you so much.
I think who is raising difficult issues like it is civil society and the gender, women empowerment. Civil society is becoming weaker and weaker. It is, and what has, this is based on my experience, that what has happened that the approach is project and target oriented. Within 1 year, achieve this much, and no processes, no kind of taking people into confidence, no processes that become more target oriented. I see that is a problem. It is a problem. And then the end user becoming more accountable to reports to owners rather than to the people, especially older women. So that is generally. So I think we need to have a very clear strategy, overall strategy, which is recognized not only by the UN, but all states are made just like SIGA, that they report back on what's happening to older people and older women. The main issue is that older women are not seen productive. They are kind of non-productive, overused. And that is not true in some cases. So looking at their strength, finding out their strength, and promoting their strength, again needs that strategy. So we need to have a very clear strategy, recognizing and like mentioning very clearly older people, and especially older women, that they need support and as we said, availability education. And again, like talking about, like in our country, issues are discussed in Friday sermon. And so why not talking about older women issue in Friday sermon? Why not do that? Why not these issues being discussed in church? That is, and the religious, because they have a very good impact on people, at least in our country.
Thank you very much. I will pass over to Alison for our closing remark.
Thank you so much. 4 calls to action. And thank you. I'm very conscious people need to leave for the NAWO event that we all want to attend. So, 1, we need to press governments to implement the instruments that we already have at the UN, at regional, national and local levels. And we also need a new convention on the rights of older persons. 2, we need to include old women in data collection and research, at the very least in 10-year age cohorts. 3, we need policies and funding for social development, humanitarian programs to empower and support all women, and old women especially. And that needs to include increased access to justice and work to combat ageism, including intergenerational work. And 4th, above all, we need more action to protect all women and girls from on and offline abuse, from conflict-related violence, sexual and gender-based violence, at all levels, from the family up to the UN. So thank you all very much for your attention and inputs this morning. Thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to the Government Office of Equality and Opportunity. And thank you very much to the UK Civil Society Women's Alliance, of which we're a proud member. Thank you very much.